Right.
So I tore my hamstring initially. I then had a shoulder injury. I also got hit by a car, which was kind of just a freak swipe. And then
Gosh.
I also, in all this muddle, had been struggling with an eating disorder as well. I swam at two World Championships, and also swam the English Channel in 2024 and was the fastest person to swim the channel that year as well. Other people had actually highlighted some concerns before this instance, and I'd ignored them basically. And there absolutely is an element of like you kind of have to hit your own rock bottom wherever that is before you will accept help.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Toughest Finish Line podcast with me, Jen Doan. I hope you're all doing well. I still cannot believe that we are in January. It feels like this month is never ending. I know that a lot of people are starting new training plans this month and focusing on new goals. So I hope these are all going well and you are absolutely in the right place for some inspiration today. Today's guest was on her way to being a pro, but injury and illness held her back. However, she is now back racing in a slightly different way and using her talent to campaign for something that affects so many. Enjoy. So, I'd like to welcome to the podcast a lady who has experienced her fair share of toughest finish lines in the swimming pool, but also with her mental health, and has just recently finished a huge sporting challenge of swimming the entire length of the River Thames, campaigning to make our waters safer. Welcome to the podcast, Amber Keegan. Amber, thank you so much for being here today. We'll talk about your amazing feat that you have just completed. But I wanted to go back to the beginning because swimming has definitely been in your blood from a very young age, hasn't it? So shall we start off with how you first got into swimming and also where you got to with swimming? Because I know that you were pretty successful with it.
Yeah, eventually. Yeah, so I got into swimming like, you know, I guess most kids start, which is just as a safety skill, It's an absolutely fantastic safety skill, and my parents just wanted me to be safe in the water so that when we went on holiday, I had those basic skills, could enjoy the sea or anything like that. But it kind of really stuck. I was a bit of a Bambi, Bambi on the land, constantly tripping over stuff, like incredibly uncoordinated. And I think I was, I don't know, just something about the water that kind of maybe stuck a little bit more than other sports, particularly when I was kind of, growing up like 5, 6, 7. And I
Mhm.
just really enjoyed it as well. And then my parents kind of swam for like just for fitness at a club local to them, which was maybe like 2 times a week they swam or something. And I really enjoyed my swimming lessons. They were kind of on a Tuesday evening, and
Yeah.
actually kind of I got more time in the water, and it was just more convenient for my parents if I swam with the club when they did. So I basically got into swimming because my parents like swimming as well.
Yeah.
And that's how it all started. A really teeny tiny little club, like volunteer run, proper grassroots
Wow.
vibes. And yeah, so that's kind of where it all began for me in a little town called Bingham in rural Nottinghamshire. And yes, then sort of go all the way to the other end of the scale and skip out all the middle bits for now. Where I got to is being in a position where I am now, which is able to kind of use my platform and my swimming for for ocean health and for water pollution in the UK.
Mhm.
And kind of part of the reason I've got that platform is that I swam at two World Championships, and also swam the English Channel in 2024 and was the fastest person to swim the channel that year as well.
Which is amazing. So, I mean, I think
Thank you.
you're summing it up very quickly there for something that you've achieved so amazingly and got so far and was so successful. Going to so it was the European Championships, is that right? That you went to?
European Junior Championships, and then as a senior, I went to two World Championships.
Amazing. I mean, it's huge what you've achieved at such a young age, and also as you got older. And What was it about swimming that you really enjoyed? What kept you going back? Because being a swimmer, it's a lot of early mornings and late evenings at the pool,
Yeah.
isn't it? So what kept you going back?
Yeah, I think just like the genuine love of it. I think it's quite hard to carry on a sport like swimming, as you say, if you don't really love it. I mean, I don't think kids train quite as much in a lot of places these days, but when I was 12, 13, I was doing kind of 9 or 10 training sessions every week. So yeah, it's
Mhm.
pretty intense as a kid.
It's
But
a
that was
lot.
a combination. It is a lot, probably a bit too much in hindsight, but I loved it. I genuinely loved it. I had great friends at swimming. It was
Mhm.
like I truly just really enjoyed being in the water. It's quite like a hard sport, like training wise, in
Yeah,
terms of like the just kind of like the mental side of pushing through hard sessions. And I
yeah,
just loved working hard and seeing improvements. And yeah, I loved training hard, and swimming is a good sport if you love training hard. And I think as well there's something really unique about swimming and other water sports as well, but especially swimming, in that you are in a team environment but you are also
mhm,
training by yourself. And
right.
I loved that I had kind of like my friends to hang out with and talk to before and after the sessions, but also when you're in the water, um, it really is just kind of like you and like the blue. And I think I really
Yeah.
kind of valued that that kind of yeah, the solo element and the peace and the kind of g- really genuinely unique kind of just like suspension of body weight, and like you're not worrying about a thing.
Yeah, you completely shut off from the outside world, don't you? And just have your you time. I mean, so swimming was obviously a huge part of your life, and you mentioned your friends. It was everything, wasn't it? And then, is it right that you had to stop swimming due to an injury? Is that what happened?
Yeah, kind of. So there was kind of like a few start-stop moments throughout my entire career from being a
Yeah.
young junior. So there was like a couple of small injuries I had when I was a teenager that kind of led to like small periods of time out the water. And yeah, I wasn't like thrilled about that as a teenager at all. But then especially as I got towards kind of like adulthood, as I was 19, 2021, those kind of early 20s particularly. I had a
Mhm.
few injuries that kind of really took me out of the water for extended periods.
Mhm.
Um, so it was a combination of unfortunate events and also me not taking care of my body correctly, and the two kind of like form in this vicious cycle.
Right.
So I tore my hamstring initially, and that was
Ouch.
January 2017. I then had a shoulder injury, which was kind of like tendinosis, tendonitis, basically just kind of an overuse injury. Um,
Right.
I also got hit by a car, which was kind of just a freak swipe.
Oh
And then
gosh.
I also, in all this muddle, had been struggling with an eating disorder as well, which obviously kind of, hadn't helped my recovery at the time. And in that total, those kind of that mess lasted for kind of 5 years. So I wasn't completely out of the
Right.
water, but I also wasn't completely in the water. There was like periods up to months at a time where I really wouldn't be in the water.
Mhm.
But it was kind of in total like basically 5 years of training without much to show for it at all.
And that's really hard, isn't it? When you've been so focused on your career, your whole life is revolving around swimming, and then to have all of those things, not just injury, but also a car accident, which is completely out of your hands. You can do anything about that. How was that time for you? How did you cope during that period?
Yeah, I didn't cope great if I'm honest. And I think in large part the reason I kind of struggled to cope is because sport wasn't just my kind of like sports career. Like sport was also my coping mechanism. So
Right.
there was kind of the dual factor of like the injury or the illness in question, and then me having to find a way to cope with that. The normal
Hmm.
thing I would go to is sport, and all of a sudden I'd lost that coping mechanism. I was not really wanting to be around my kind of training friends, like as inclusive as they were trying to be with me. I was just so gutted that I couldn't swim. I found it really emotionally challenging to be in that environment all the time. like some people when they're injured find it really helpful to be around their teammates,
Yeah.
and I honestly didn't. I find it helpful to maybe see them once a week, but not to be kind of hanging out with them loads because it just
Yeah.
gave me massive FOMO.
Yeah.
Um, and I didn't really kind of know how to kind of, cope just with all the other life stuff that we had going on. I was at uni at the time. Um, it was kind of pretty hard. And again, like swimming was normally a thing where I'd like completely switch off from
Yeah.
uni. And without that, I then kind of like found myself really like going down a spiral of like focusing too much on work. And then on top of that, during kind of that whole messy injury period as well. My granddad was also really unwell and eventually passed away
Oh,
as well. And again, like this thing that had always been there for me, swimming, like for the last 10 years had been my coping
yeah.
mechanism. And I couldn't use it as a coping mechanism anymore. Um, and I found that incredibly tough.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's something that we often talk about on this podcast of you have your goal or your thing that you're working towards, and if that's taken away from you, the impact that that has on you socially, physically, mentally is huge. And I wanted to come back because you mentioned about the eating disorder, and I know I've had quite a few messages from people who have said about eating disorders and any advice, or is there? I've actually had somebody message me and said, "Have you got a guest who could come on and talk about eating disorders?" And because it is such a big thing, and I know particularly within the world of sport and swimming, when there is such a there's the press can be brutal and social media can be brutal about how women look and things. Can you just talk us through the eating disorder, how that looked for you, what it was like going through that?
Yeah, so I'll kind of preface this with it looks different for kind of like
Absolutely.
everybody.
Yeah.
And I think that there is, as you say, more and more conversation about this topic, and that's honestly great. But I think what can be challenging for people, particularly, is they maybe hear someone talking about it and they go, "Oh, that isn't quite how I experience it,
Yeah.
so I definitely don't have one." And it's like that's not quite like accurate. There are like common threads through lots
Okay.
of these different things, but it's
Yeah.
someone might not necessarily experience it the same as me. And for me, what that kind of looked like, and all of this is stuff that I couldn't have verbalized while I was going through it. I can kind of put
Right.
words to it afterwards, but at the time, it was just this big old mess of kind of feelings. So I'll touch on both of those.
Yeah.
I think for me, it manifested initially in um, really being really afraid of food and being feeling
Okay.
really guilty when I was eating, particularly certain like types of foods, those same types of foods that are particularly kind of indicated by the media, your carbs, your cakes, your biscuits, all of which I love and enjoy now with absolutely no guilt at all. But they were like really a source of like fear for me at the
Wow.
time. And just to someone with a healthy relationship with food or hasn't experienced it, the idea of like feeling like fear over a potato can sound quite trivial, but the level of what that fear felt like inside is like similar to being genuinely afraid. I think like most women, right, can relate to that fear of walking home at night. Like that was
Yeah.
nothing compared to eating in front of other people.
Wow.
And we can know that we maybe don't need to feel a certain way about things, but it doesn't stop us from experiencing it in that moment.
Yeah.
And in that moment, actually, food had just become this source of like guilt and fear for me for so long that I didn't know that wasn't normal. And when I looked at my phone or I looked at my TV, all I saw was, other women saying, "Oh, here's how you reduce carbs if you want to be faster," or "Here's how you get lighter," or it was so kind of ingrained in culture. I didn't really have much positive messaging me reminding me that actually this isn't quite normal. And
Hmm.
then as an athlete as well, this kind of all got tied up into like over exercise obsession.
Right.
There's training a lot is one thing, but I guess the reasons behind why you're doing that
Yeah.
training are another one totally. And kind of behaviors that manifested for me were exercising more than I should have done when I was trying to recover from injury, or
Right.
trying to squeeze extra exercise in, particularly if I was, I don't know, maybe going for a night out with my friends, or I felt like I'd been eating or doing things that I shouldn't have, then I'd find myself like squeezing in an extra run, even though there was like absolutely no need to be doing that. Um, and I didn't recognize any of these behaviors in myself. It was actually a nutritionist who I was very fortunate to be working with through my swimming club at the time,
Right.
who actually pulled me aside and picked up on these things. And I think, often people with eating disorders aren't in a great place themselves. And,
Yeah.
when you're in a great place, you're not necessarily going to know when it's time to stop and start climbing out that hole again.
Hmm.
And it was really pivotal for me to have someone else to tell me that what I was doing wasn't normal.
Hmm.
And that can be really challenging. And, other people had actually, highlighted some concerns before this instance, and I'd ignored them basically. And that there absolutely is an element of like you kind of have to hit your own rock bottom, wherever
Yeah.
that is, before you will accept help. But
Yeah.
that doesn't mean that we can't be having those conversations. And, eventually something will click and all those messages from back down the line will kind of come in. But it really ruined it started to take away the joy from exercise for me, really, because I was using it to kind of like justify things, or to punish kind of myself or behaviors in a certain way. It
Mm.
made my relationships with my friends very difficult. Um, a lot of our socializing is around kind of eating or drinking.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
then all of a sudden, all of those things were so stressful for me that seeing my friends became stressful. And I would either not turn up to things, or I would turn up but be so stressed inside, even if other people couldn't see it, that I wouldn't really
Yeah.
be actually enjoying myself. And then it also had ramifications for kind of my other time I was at university. And you know I did pretty well, but let's be honest, no one's brain functions when they're not fueling themselves properly at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah. I mean, it just completely takes over everything, doesn't it? It impacts on all aspects of your life, from education to family to support systems. And you
Definitely.
mentioned about that anxiety building up inside and that real fear coming through. Was that the main impact that it had? We hear about people saying how they would binge and then struggle afterwards. Were there any other things that it impacted on?
That's a really interesting point that you've just brought up there, actually. So I think when people think of eating disorders, they think of two things normally. Again, this is starting to change, but people think of anorexia or bulimia. And when they think of
Yeah.
anorexia, they think of like absolute stick thin, like
Yeah.
really, people, or they think of bulimia and they think of kind of like binging and purging.
Yeah.
In reality, actually, those two disorders make up half of eating disorders. The other
Yeah.
half actually look completely differently. And there's even a whole classification of eating disorders, which are the name is literally like eating disorders not otherwise specified, because it recognizes like there's a real complexity, there's a real range. And there absolutely are identifying like behaviors, but there's also like a bundle a bundle of other things like your fear and anxiety, and things like that that might look different in some people. And for
Yeah.
me, I managed to convince myself I didn't have an eating disorder by doing things like I would always eat every meal. Those meals might be tiny, but I'd never skip a meal, so I was convinced it was okay.
Yeah.
Or I'd still be getting all of my food groups in. um
Mhm.
and or and little things like this that I would tell myself made what I was doing okay or normal. And I think
Mhm.
that's kind of, another common thread is that when people are struggling, they find ways to justify what they're doing. And
Yeah.
for me, people show me the science about how harmful what I was doing really kind of helped me personally. Um, but as well, kind of those perceptions of what anorexia and
Yeah.
bulimia look like. I think the vast majority of people who have, actually don't quote me on the vast majority of people, many people who have
Yeah.
anorexia are not necessarily going to look like they have
No.
anorexia. Most people with eating disorders have what would not be considered an underweight BMI. I mean, BMI is bullshit, like we all know that anyway, but it's still used to diagnose people and effectively tell people that they're not sick enough. And I got really lucky to get support when I did. I was at a GP service that was incredibly university focused, and
Mhm.
I got help when we were in the middle of summer and there was no students around. So I'm so fortunate to be someone who got seen very quickly, and that is
Mhm.
not the reality for people in most of the UK. And if I'd been in
No.
most of the places in the UK, I would have been turned away for a, another year or two even, because I would not have been considered underweight enough for treatment.
Yeah, which is terrifying, isn't it? That
Yeah.
sadly is very much the case, and I'm so glad you answered it in that way, because that's one thing I wanted to get across on this episode, that it's not just your stereotypical anorexia or bulimia. Eating disorders can cover so many broader areas, and you're the example of that. And so thank you for sharing so openly how that's affected you, because I think it's a really important message to get across. And so let's go on to the support then, because you mentioned that you had a nutritionist who, thank goodness for that nutritionist, helped you to identify where you were. And you mentioned the doctors there, but what was the therapy, the support? What was it that helped you come through that?
Yeah, so kind of again, it can look differently for everybody, but a few things that
Hmm.
helped me in particular were, so I'd have weekly kind of sessions with a dietitian
Okay.
who was supporting me through that process. And I think that was about 9 months of treatment, and then after that, like very occasional check-ins just to make sure I was
Hmm.
staying on track. And then on top of that, I had kind of predominantly actually my support system at the time, particularly in the early days, had come through sport.
Right.
So I had an absolutely amazing coach, and who very much took a view of a person first approach with me, and with other athletes as well. It was never
Hmm.
about, oh, Amber needs to be racing. Like it was about, oh, let's get you better again. And then when you're
Yeah.
better again, we could talk about what competition might look like. And I wasn't thrilled about that at the time. I wanted to talk about competition, but that was really kind of, that decision was like removed from me until I was
The right
healthy, which is
one.
absolutely the best way. Yeah. Um, and again, I was super fortunate in that kind of not all athletes have that available to them.
Hmm.
Whether it be because coaches don't have the time or the resources or the knowledge, or they simply just believe that their way is best and they they don't want to see it any other way. But yeah, I had fantastic coach support, and actually for me, swimming was like a huge motivation to get better. And I think,
Right.
as the like contributing problems that sport has that can lead to eating disorders, it can also be a huge carrot as well.
Yep.
Like I wanted to get better because I wanted to get faster again. I wanted to get better so I was allowed to train more again. So my kind of training volume had been, some people need to be like completely away from sport, and some
Yeah.
people it's beneficial to keep it in. That's like a medical team decision. But for me, like we kept it in, because it was like a huge motivating factor. But I was only allowed to kind of, my training volume was dropped back, and I was only increasing my training volume as I was able to kind of tick off milestones with like as I was improving, to make sure that I wasn't doing any kind of further damage to my body. And for me, that really worked.
Yeah.
Um, and I had kind of like a select group of other people as well outside that environment who knew what was going on. I certainly didn't tell everybody at the time.
No.
Um,
Mm.
it was just too kind of emotionally difficult for me to be explaining
Course.
myself to
Yeah.
people constantly, to be honest. So I had my little bubble. I kept it to my little bubble, and it's only, well, years later really, when I was actually healthy enough and settled enough in myself, that I really started talking more widely about this. But having those few key people was also super important, so that if I decided not to turn up for a social with my mates, at least one of my mates knew what the real reason for it was and would
Right.
check up on me. And that was really, really like great.
Looking for a strong start to your 2026 triathlon season? World of Triathlon Live, powered by Tridot, is coming to Excel London on the 28th to the 29th of March 2026. The UK's only dedicated triathlon expo. Expect 2 days of inspiring athlete talks, practical coaching sessions, and get hands-on with world-class swim, bike, and run brands, all designed for every level of triathlete. And I'm delighted to say that I'll be appearing at the show too, with a live episode of the Toughest Finish Line podcast. Early bird tickets for just £5 are only available until the 28th of January 2026. So book now at worldotriathlonlive.com for the best price. I hope to see you there. Yeah, and I think it's just trying to find, even if it's just that one person who you can talk to and
Yeah.
can confide in and have a cry, but can also help build you up when you are struggling, or just be that listening ear, isn't it? You just need that little network around you, and thank goodness that nutritionist felt confident that they could come and speak to you about it and help you to identify what was going on. So I'm so pleased that you had that, because your story is such an inspiration coming from all of that. And the other thing we haven't even mentioned yet, which I know when we spoke prior to this, you mentioned about, is that you've also got a diagnosis of ADHD, haven't you? And so I just wanted to pick up on that, because I think there's so much. ADHD is talked about quite a bit, and it's often the negative side of ADHD. And I just wondered how ADHD affects you as a swimmer, not necessarily just the challenges it brings, but maybe some of the strength that it brings as well.
I really like that question. Yeah. Yeah. So I was like diagnosed actually like post swimming career. And in part because all of the traits that had been so helpful to me when I was training and not quite as helpful as out of the sportsy
Yeah.
environment. But like to talk about like those positives for a minute, I think the kind of like the energy I have for sure when you're doing a sport that requires 20 hours a week. The extra kind of like high productivity I have being like awake first thing in the morning, more awake than most people are able to, was super helpful for me to be able to like get the most out of morning training sessions. Yeah, if most people's, I don't know, base level energy units were on like a 60, then I was on like an 80. And actually that meant that, hard training didn't affect my kind of middle of the day, university
Okay.
studies, work, whatever it is. I
Yeah.
think as much as that hard training would maybe affect someone who kind of didn't have ADHD, I
Yeah.
think the kind of the like the obsession and the kind of like level of hyper focus that I was able to kind of like bring to my swimming, and also kind of the breadth of ideas. Like I just kind of loved pulling things from all over the place, and especially me and my coach worked really kind of closely together as I got into like my open water career, because neither of us had ever done it before.
Right.
And
Okay.
kind of that like ability to kind of like learn widely and bring
Yeah.
different things in and come up with fresh ideas and keep things fresh for both of us, I think was really, yeah, useful. Um, and yeah, I definitely think I wouldn't have been the athlete I was if my brain wasn't wired the way it is. So no, I'm super grateful for it.
Yeah, I love that, because, as I say, it's often spoken about in such a negative way. But I know, having spoken to quite a few athletes, they're saying how it does help them quite a bit. And I mean, you mentioned kind of your energy being up here. Did you have those times where you would crash and struggle and need time out? How was it for you?
Yeah, I think I absolutely did, and still probably like kind of do as well.
Hmm.
I think I've got better and better as I get older at actually, yeah, learning to maybe rein myself in a little bit when I'm feeling super great, to stop myself like going
Hmm.
100 miles an hour and then absolutely crashing and
Yeah.
like burning out. And kind of like I seem to be quite good at managing to like time my crashes. Like I would quite frequently, we'd be like I building up for a training swimming competition, and then we'd have maybe three key competitions a year, and after all of those would maybe have like a mini chance to reset, and that would normally be when I crashed. Like I seem to just about manage to kind of keep things going until it really
Well
was like
scheduled.
kaput time. Yeah, most of the time. To say that I always manage that would be an absolute lie. But
Mhm.
on the whole, I think actually just that concept of like having mini blocks, I
Yeah.
think is generally a good strategy for life. And I'm not training under someone else's kind of training schedule anymore, but that is actually something that I've tried to build into my like continued training that I think most people who are doing sport and have maybe not, been as lucky as I have to have like had the coaching support and experience from other people I had previously wouldn't necessarily build in. And
Yeah.
actually, like I know now in training for anything else, if you don't build in those blocks, you are just going to kind of like burn yourself out. But kind of that said as well, um, I definitely it's easy to look back with kind of like rose tinted glasses, but there were also kind of yeah, definitely periods, particularly when I was at university and the schedules were kind of clashing with sport that I absolutely didn't always get that balance right. And kind
Yeah.
of even now I know that my old shoulder injury, which does not really cause me any problems day to day, but if I'm having a particularly stressful period, can absolutely kind of like flare up. And as I got towards my later career, actually what me and my coach got much better at doing is actually making sure we took some of that load off to kind of stop me from burning out before I
Burning
got
out.
there.
Yeah.
If I had a lot on outside of the pool, then actually some of my training would be changed, or maybe the intensity would reduced, or maybe we'd take out a couple of sessions. And that actually never ended up in the long run looking like less sessions in a year. It just looked like being smarter around
Hmm.
certain times.
Yeah.
But I absolutely think, there are many great things to ADHD, but in general in life, it absolutely one of the things it manifested in that was that I did need some help and support with was actually not getting like super hyper, super into loads of things, having a great time, and then like crashing and burning out. And I think that's a cycle that to an extent a lot of people can relate
Absolutely.
to. And
Yeah.
I think then when you layer on neurodivergency on top of that, you get kind of like these even higher highs and these even like
Even
lower
low.
lows.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. I was going to say, factoring in those breaks is so important for any athlete. And for me, as a triathlon coach, I'm often having to say to athletes, you need to take a break, you need to take some time out. But even more so when you've got, a neurological condition on top of that, I can imagine it being even more
I think
important.
that's where coaches can be kind of so useful as well, right? Because they're the sorts of things that it's really difficult to like actually stop, even if you like know it's what you want.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think actually a lot of the time that's what a coach is for, right? They're not, depending on the person, some people do need a G up, but actually
Hmm.
a lot of really motivated people who are doing sports, or whatever level that's at, often the role of a coach is to pull them back, right? Not
Yeah.
to like push them
Yeah.
past
Yeah.
their breaking point.
Absolutely, because there's, as an athlete, there's that inner drive. I've got to get to that finish line. I've got to, get that time or
Yeah.
whatever your goal is. And but you're just going to burn out that way if you keep going and keep pushing so hard. So coming on then to some of your sporting toughest finish lines, you mentioned about a world record and crossing the channel. So shall we talk about that? How was it?
To clarify, I don't know if you want to re-say that bit or not. It wasn't a world record, but it was the fastest swim of the year
Okay,
overall.
let's go through that one. Thank you for that one. So, coming on then to your sporting challenges, you mentioned earlier about crossing the channel and doing it in the fastest time of the year, which is absolutely incredible. Can you talk us through that event? How was it doing that? Because I've heard it can be pretty brutal at times.
Yeah, it can be pretty. It was very cool and very brutal, like in a nutshell. But no, it was and like an absolutely amazing like life experience.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, I went to France quite a bit, and we'd like drive there and cross the channel. So it was like really kind of surreal
Yeah.
to this body of water that I'd like seen since I was a kid. And to kind of like just the concept of swimming across it. It is like so iconic, like
Yeah.
not just to like the world of swimming, but also just like we know of it in the UK. And
Yeah.
it's really, really special and really cool. And I was kind of I came to doing the channel through kind of a weird route. We just had the 2024 World Championships in Doha, and that was
Hmm.
our like one opportunity to qualify for Paris. Um,
Right.
Olympic size. Long story short, you normally get kind of more than one chance for open water, but because of the pandemic and the way that schedules have been smushed, there was like one race. It was like that everything rode on this one race,
Wow.
and it wasn't my race. Kind of no, like, I take full responsibility for that. But it also was not the way that I had hoped it was going to go.
Right.
And I kind of didn't really know initially what to do with myself after that. I'd actually booked on to do a channel race in Australia. And I deliberately booked that after World Championships because I was like, right, well, if World Champs goes great, this can be a fun training camp in Australia. And if World
Yeah.
Champs goes rubbish, then I've just got something else to think about
Yeah.
until I can like get myself together. So I had a bit of a mope, and then about a month later, I was out in Australia, and it's much harder to mope in Australia
Yeah.
when the sun's shining. And I did the Perth. I swim from Perth. Um, it's called Rottnest Swim. Rottnest is an island that's I think it's like 27-ish K off
Wow.
Perth. It's a race which actually got called because of the conditions. When I was
Okay.
like 2 kilometers from the finish or something, which is like absolutely gutted. So I can't actually say I finished the swim, but I tried. I tried channel swimming,
No.
but I really loved it.
Yeah.
And I think I really enjoyed it, and I was like, oh well, if I like channel swimming, like, oh, I've got to do the channel. And I had like all this training under my belt, and I was like, right, well, that was the best time to do it. I'm gonna be able to do a better job of it now than I would be if I kind of took my time to think about this. And I got really lucky, and I've basically got a slot that had been free within a few months, and normally
Wow.
there's years of waiting list, so I was like
Yeah.
really 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 grateful for this slot. And yeah, had a few months, buckled down, got some extra cold water training under my belt. That was the biggest thing for me, was like
Right.
concern about the cold water. And the body is incredibly adaptable, and you can actually get used to cold water quickly. But I cannot lie, every time I got into the cold water near me, like it's from April, May, June, I was sat there thinking, I don't know that I can do this. Like, I don't know that I can tolerate this like 15, 16 degrees for however many hours. And
Yeah.
it was probably the first thing I ever like stood on the like start of going, I don't know if I can finish this. Like
Wow.
I used
Okay.
to race
Yeah.
10K. Like I trained for it. I knew that you know, unless I got like not injured by something within the race, I
Yeah.
wasn't not going to finish the 10K. It was like, how fast can I do the 10K?
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
was like stood before I swam to France, genuinely like, I don't know if I could do this. And that
Wow.
really kind of excited me, and also terrified me.
Yeah, of
But
course.
it was really a different feeling to what I was used to. Um, and I did it as a fundraiser as well for Surfers Against Sewage, who are a marine conservation charity here in the UK focusing on sewage and plastic. And it was just really nice to do a swim that was for me and for
Yeah.
charity, and not have to worry about qualifying or a governing body or any of
Yeah.
this, and just like really be there to just see what I could do on the day, raise money for a good cause along the way.
Hmm.
Um, and it was kind of absolutely amazing for like all of those reasons. The swim itself was very cold. That's probably my biggest challenge. Um, I was absolutely flying from the start, or at the start, I should say, not the whole way. Um, and kind of, I was, I think, probably mostly from adrenaline. The cold didn't really start to set in for me until like a few hours in. And then I really kind of started to get a little bit chilly, but like wasn't too bad. And it was from like around 4 hours when I really got quite cold and my pace dropped off. And that
Right.
was pace dropping off was from a combination of because I got cold, and also because I tried to see, I wanted to see how fast I could do it, because I couldn't let go of this idea of times. And maybe gassed it a little bit too much at the start, but you live and you learn.
It's the inner athlete in you, Amber.
Well, it is. And I'd be lying if I said that I had a kind of like had my eye on some of the records. So I was 8 hours 46 minutes, and I mean, British record overall was 8 hours, and then the women's overall record is like 7 hours 40. And actually, that was a
Wow.
very humbling moment of the channel, and one that swimming open water I should have been wiser to going in, which is, you can train as much as you want, but if you don't have the best conditions, as well as being the best
Absolutely.
version of yourself you can
Yeah.
be, like you records are kind of like completely irrelevant. And I think
Yeah.
that's a very good learning part of it as well. But yeah, I got really, really cold, and that was definitely the biggest challenge. Especially because when you get cold, like everything starts to hurt. And um had a fantastic team on the boat. So Tim Denyer of Red Top Swimming was effectively like he'd help me coordinate everything, and he was like my what's called my feeder. So for people who haven't seen kind of channel swimming, you have to have a safety boat with you.
Hmm.
So you have a pilot who's there to guide the boat, navigate the swim, and also communicate within the boats, which is really important.
Right.
Boats
Yeah.
are used to boats traveling at boat speed, and you're a boat that's traveling at swim speed. So they have to make sure that boats know that you won't be, necessarily getting out of the way for them. And
Yeah.
and then I also was very fortunate to have my dad and my boyfriend on the boat, which was really special for me.
Oh, amazing.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, when I was getting really cold, basically kind of lots of like hot drinks and hot gels and stuff were there to warm me up. And it really did feel like that channel went on forever. The worst part was when I could see France. Everyone had told me like, don't look up, because if you can see France, you'll think you're close, and you're definitely not. And I had not
Wow.
looked up,
Okay.
but even from my like looking to the side, it was there in my peripheral vision, and I was like, oh, we can't be that far away. And it was about 6 hours in, I was really tired, I was really cold, and because of like landing spots as well, you can't necessarily just go straight. And we started swimming parallel to France when I was tired, cold,
No.
and
Oh.
at one point I just left the boat. I just started swimming towards France, and they were like honking, calling me like, Amma, you can't, you have to come back. So we had to kind of go parallel to ensure and get to France. And I was honestly losing my marbles in that moment. And yeah,
I'm gonna do
it
it
really does
anyway.
it really does silly things to your head when you're like in the cold and hard work
Mhm.
for kind of that long period of time. And they're really there is no like side to hold on to. Like you can stop at the boat and tell them to can the swim, but like wasn't going to do that. And there's this weird moment of like many moments of like knowing you actually can't stop, or you're just not
Yeah.
going to do the thing. You can't have a rest, like, or you're going to get taken like by the tide. You just have to keep going.
Yeah.
And yet half of your brain also going, but I'm really cold and tired, like, can we stop now? It was a very strange experience, and yeah, really tough but fantastic.
Yeah, and absolutely, I imagine you found your inner resilience at that point to just keep you going and pushing through. And was there anything else you said to yourself other than if I stop, the tide is going to take me backwards? But was there anything else that you focused on to help you through?
Yeah, I thought of quite a lot of different things actually. I mean, I was fundraising for Surfers Against Sewage, and I was, thinking about that. I was like, you can't stop here, Amber. It's embarrassing. You're meant to be raising money for charity. And there's obviously no shame in, like, not everybody who starts the channel like finishes the channel. And there is
Right.
absolutely no shame in that. And like conditions can vary day to day. But at that point for me, it wasn't a physical issue if you're not being able to do it. It was just a mental battle. I would think about kind of, why I was doing the swim for
Yeah.
the charity, and also about like my own swimming journey and the journey I had done in my more
Yeah.
here and moments, that is. And also about like, you know, I in those 5 years of injuries, I couldn't do 35K in a week. And here I was like probably doing that in a day. I actually don't know
Yeah.
my exact kilometers, but the idea that I would have been able to do a swim like this was just like absolutely like beyond anything I could have imagined. Like I was
Yeah.
told I wouldn't be able to train again on my shoulder. And I never years before that could have eaten the amount that I needed to eat to be able to do that swim. It like the amount of carbs you needed to eat for like an event like that to yeah, in and like just being grateful for all of those things, and
Yeah.
reminding myself I'm so lucky to be there, and I've chosen to be there, so I can blooming well keep moving.
Yeah.
But
Definitely.
yeah,
Good
and
good
also
motivator.
yeah, I'd never really been able to do any open water with like my family had come to kind of one race, but it's not a very good sport to watch a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And actually to have like, I think my dad must have been stood up on that boat for about 8 hours of the
Oh.
I was 46. And actually to between my dad and my boyfriend, they always made sure that there was someone stood within my eyesight.
Oh,
And
I love
that was
that.
like the most uplifting thing in the world, was to like have them there with me. I mean, goodness knows it must have been a boring day for them. And then honestly, some of it, I was just so cold and tired. I wasn't even thinking. My brain was just mushed. It was just like one arm after the other, keep going.
Yeah, go through the motions, just one step at a time. Wow, what's an amazing achievement. And you know, that hasn't been your only amazing achievement. You've done so many, and which is incredibly inspiring to after everything that you've been through. And I just wanted to touch on your one that's a little bit more recent, with recently swimming the length of the Thames, which, is it right, you did that with a team of 8 with over 230 kilometers of swimming non-stop?
Yeah, so that was the plan.
Right.
So yeah, it didn't quite go that way. But the idea was to raise, well, to raise awareness of water pollution. Here in the UK, we have pretty awful water pollution, but we also
Yeah.
have this kind of new government, and he came in on the promise that they were gonna fix our water system, and a new laws that are going to kind of be laid in Parliament next year. So it is a really exciting time for water in the UK, and there's genuinely like a once in a generation chance to kind of like fix this stuff.
Yeah.
If we don't do it properly this time, when is it actually going to get done properly?
Yeah.
So it's this really pivotal moment for UK water, and the idea for this kind of like doing this relay swim came from a friend of mine, Andy Donaldson, who I'd done a swim with the previous year. And he'd kind of come to me like, oh, like, do you think it'd be cool to do like a relay down the Thames or something? And anyway, from then we got talking about this relay concept, and we decided to make it a team of 8 swimmers,
Uh-huh.
and representing Northern Ireland, Wales, Scotland, and England. Because water pollution is present in all those places. There's different flavors of it in all of those places. But we really wanted to kind of, yeah, unite the UK and take this message
Mhm.
to Westminster, literally to Westminster, that kind of it's not acceptable, the state of
Mhm.
seas and rivers at the moment, but there is this amazing chance for change.
Yeah.
So the idea was to have like this non-stop relay over approximately 4 days, well, it's about 3.5 days. In the end, we didn't manage to swim the whole thing as a complete relay because of the pollution in the water. And we knew this was a risk when we started. And
Yeah.
we had this amazing team. Not only did we have kind of live sewage overflow monitoring from the team on the boat, so we were again fundraising for Surfers Against Sewage, and they were also supporting us on this swim. And then also there's these amazing communities of citizen scientists all across the UK, but in this instance, the ones from the Thames had
Yeah.
given us heads up of certain areas we should be cautious about or also completely avoid. Um, so as we were going down the river, we were also kind of we had a probe that was basically giving us a live indication of the water quality wherever we were. And
Wow.
unfortunately, we did have to get out and swim a few times. So it didn't end up being a non-stop relay, but we swam most of the like
Yeah.
230 odd kilometers anyway, which
Yeah.
is really cool. Absolutely amazing effort from the whole team. We swam like all the way through the nights and things. Yeah, it was pretty chaotic, and really tough, but yeah, really, really amazing work.
Yeah, fantastic work. And, you know, living on the coast myself, and how often I look at our sewage ratings and it's like, oh, yep, we can't go swimming again because it's so bad. And so it was incredible seeing you do that. And it's kind of ironic, isn't it, that you were doing that, raising awareness of sewage, and actually you have to stop the event because of how bad the sewage is. So I think it just emphasizes that issue even more. And I saw lots of brilliant photos of you outside Parliament, raising that awareness, which is great. And yeah, has there been any response from it?
Well, yes, and pending.
Right.
So yeah, so the week itself was fantastic. I think we got national news coverage every day that week, which demonstrates just how much the public care
Yeah,
about this still,
absolutely.
and actually like public attention is imperative if we're actually going to get significant legal change. Because if the public stop caring even for a couple of months, then all of a sudden the pressure's off.
Mhm.
And actually, right now is the most important time
Yeah.
for pressure. So that coverage was fantastic. And we've also just 2 weeks ago, I think. We have I think it's 13 minutes of a film that was made about our swim. And that's also going to be a campaigning tool going forward. So actually, after I'd started working on this swim, like on a voluntary basis, I got a job with Surfers Against Sewage. And I work in policy. So part of my job is going to be taking that film to, yeah, to politicians around the UK as part of our campaigning. So yeah,
That's
I think the other thing about the 10 swim as well is, it really highlights the contrast as well. We couldn't finish the swim because of Felicia. It was absolutely pants. But like we also swam through like some absolutely kind of incredible places. And I think
yeah,
most people swimming in the UK have had both of those experiences as well.
yeah.
We just want everyone to be able to enjoy the water, really. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And how were you after it? Did you have any side effects from the swim?
Yeah. So there was 8 of us and 2 of us got ill. So considering, how far down the river we swam, how
Yeah,
much we swam through, and also the fact that, it's not like we were getting full night's sleep on this swim.
no,
I think like only 2 people getting ill out of 8 is pretty good. But
absolutely.
yeah, I was pretty ill. Actually, I had like anti-sickness medication from A&E ill. It was yeah,
Gosh.
it was the most ill I've been in my adult life, and it was honestly really scary. Um,
Mhm.
almost physically ill anyway. And yeah, it was the first time I've experienced kind of waterborne illness that badly. I've had like a funny tummy or like a few days
Yeah,
of diarrhea before, but I've never had kind of can't physically keep water down. And that was really scary. But
yeah.
thankfully I was, within a few days, like my most significant symptoms have passed, and then I had a couple of weeks of just being like completely like wiped out and like super
Mm.
tired. But like thankfully have made a completely full recovery. But yeah, it wasn't the plan to get ill. I wasn't
No,
happy to get ill, but
no.
yeah, it's also the reality of people all around the country
Yeah.
um as well. So
Which
there's
again just highlights how
something to
important
that.
that work is, isn't it? And how it is a key thing that we need to be promoting because we've got some beautiful seas around and waters around us that we just need to look after, don't we? So it's amazing work that you're doing there. And some of the others I just want to touch on the other work that you set up your own charity, haven't you?
Yeah.
How do you fit this all in, Amber? I don't know how you do it.
Um, if I'm honest, the balance isn't always great. Like I can't say I always juggle it perfectly well. Um, as is you, we've been talking about having this chat for months, so I think that that shows. Balance isn't always there, but yeah, the charity works
Yeah.
because we have a team. So
Right.
when I am AWOL, we have a fantastic group of people and there's no one slipping through the hoops. But
But
yeah,
do you
no,
want to just to tell us a
it's
little bit about the charity
yeah,
and what it does when you have the
I
time
would
to be
love
able to
to.
squeeze it in?
Yeah, no, it's probably the best thing I've ever done. Yeah, so the charity is called Athlete Interactions, and we support women and girls and other minorities gender with their mental health. Um, so the primary way that we do this is through what we call the Athlete Support Network. And what that is basically it's a free confidential peer support network. So we have a bunch of absolutely amazing humans who are volunteers, and we provide kind of training and support to them. And then it's their role to just be there, be a friendly ear, advice if needed for anyone who kind of just needs a bit of a hand. So we've talked to kind of people have used our service from everything from I've got a big life decision about my sport to make and I just want to chat it through with someone who is like completely external to my environment, through to
Hmm.
injury, illness, like kind of moving, either whether that's like onward sport or moving locations, eating disorders and kind of relative energy deficiency in sport as well come up. Literally anything and everything under the sun. And we support everyone from kind of elite athletes through to, I do this a few times a week. Am I an athlete? The answer is
Right.
yes, for the record. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
if sport is a big part of your life and a big part of your identity, then yeah, we're here for people. And we also kind of do some other things. So we do webinars semi-regularly on different topics and like a bunch of other things as well. But yeah, the Athlete Support Network is our main thing. And I think it came from a ex-alpine skier called Rachel Rogers, who I have the pleasure of working with. And she approached me after I'd kind of started setting up Athlete Interactions because we'd worked
Hmm.
together on other things in the past. And she was like, "Hey, I've got this idea for this like peer support program, and like I wondered if you'd like maybe want to like try and create something." And I was like, "Oh, this is amazing! Like I've been trying to think about
Perfect.
like something like this as well." And so we kind of like came together, and that was years ago now, and it's kind of grown into this amazing thing. I think at the minute we have about 8 volunteers of just like
Wow.
brilliant people who are just like there to listen. Like when I had my eating disorder, I couldn't see anyone like to talk to. I didn't really want to talk to my teammates or my
Yeah.
competitors about what was going on, but I did want to talk to someone who kind of like understood my sport. My
Hmm.
dietitian was amazing and like she could listen really well, but unless you live sport and breathe sport in that way, it's
You don't
really
know.
hard to kind of, yeah, understand it. So, yeah,
Yeah.
we just wanted to make sure that no one who ever experienced what kind of the different things that we'd all experienced had to do so like by themselves. And if people have people to talk to in their immediate environment, then fantastic. But
Yeah.
if you want someone else who's not in your immediate environment, or if you don't have anyone to chat to, then we're someone who's there for people. So yeah, um,
Oh, it's such
that's
a
athlete interactions.
yeah, it's such valuable work that you do. And if anybody is
Thank
interested
you.
in finding out more, what's the best way that they do that?
Yeah, so most people, we do have a website, athleteinteractions.org. Our Instagram is probably the place people most often find us, which is just at Athlete Interactions. We're actually not great at posting, but we do respond, and that's where all our links are. So yeah.
Great. We can put that in the description
Thank
for
you.
this podcast. We can share that for sure. Oh, Amber, thank you so much for today. It's been such an inspiring story of hearing how you've come through some really tough situations, but are now fighting through and doing so much for good and supporting other people and our seas around the UK. Have you got some future events coming up that you're training for that you can share, or anything happening?
Yeah, potentially. There's a few things down the line, but they're so far down the line that if I
Right.
said them, they'd probably have changed. But also, to be honest, I'm trying to deliberately factor in some like no plan time
Yeah,
and not let myself commit to anything until at least next year. Because I think it is so easy to run from one thing to the next that actually stopping to think,
absolutely.
yeah, what we're doing, why we're doing it, and what do we actually want to do rather than just go with the momentum. So yeah, a bit of a boring answer, sorry.
No,
Stay
no, I
tuned.
think it's
So
I think
yeah,
it's
there will be things.
a teaser, but it's also a reminder to everybody to, that it's okay to have that downtime and work out what you want to do. And so we always finish the podcast with the question of if you could give some advice to somebody who may be going through similar to what you went through, whether it's you being injured or whether it is an eating disorder, what would you say to that person?
No matter how alone you feel like you are, I promise you, you're not. I think it's so easy. We all struggle with our own little things and our own little heads, and we get really wrapped up. And actually, there will be people out there who understand and get it, and that help is available. And it
Mhm.
feels really daunting, but yeah, it is available, and it is worth it.
Yeah, and just pushing through to try and find that help if you can't see it immediately in front of you, isn't it? So,
Uh,
Amber, thank you so much for today. As I say, it's
Thank
been so
you.
inspiring listening to your story, and thank you for all you are doing for the seas and the waters of the UK, and for other athletes who may be struggling. As I say, we'll put that link in our description to the podcast. But thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.